I remember in 2011, there was like this big ice storm and all the roads got closed down, and I was isolated at university and no gym access, which was like a big thing with my eating disorder. So I thought I'd give you guys a little background, but this is meant to be like a sharing session too. So if you have stories that you want to put out there, then feel free to put that out there as well. Okay. So I'm a little unique situation. I developed an eating disorder at 19 years of age. Okay, so a lot later in my life. Uh, for 5 years, I struggled with an eating disorder. Okay, anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Anorexia nervosa lasted about 2 years, and then my bulimia was a 5-year struggle. So during those times, I was in university. So it was a big struggle because in high school, I'm about the size I was in high school right now. Okay. And you'll see that I openly will talk about my weight. I'll openly talk about my symptoms. I'm not embarrassed about it. It's part of my past. It's who I am and why I am. Okay. So 165 pounds in high school, very athletic girl in all the sports, definitely on the thicker end of girls, still am, don't care. Went to university, first 2 years, sports, and then I got into fitness, my degrees in kin. I became a fitness trainer, personal trainer, and, I started losing weight one summer and got more attention. Okay. And the more attention led to more positive appraisals. And even what I found with what my weight loss was, I was getting more opportunities to do stuff, even though I was the same person. Okay. So it became very cyclical for me that if I kept my weight down, then I would be more accepted by society and by people. And to tell you the truth, that like probably was the worst thing for me. And it's all cyclical and trying to get out of that process. So right now, with someone with an eating disorder, if they're currently right now, what they're probably finding is they're either around food all day and they have nothing to take their mind away from that because they're either self-isolating or they're working from home, and then they have that food right to their access. And that can be very, very challenging for people. One of my girlfriends from university, 10 years struggling with an eating disorder. I called her last week and we were talking just about that. So I am very much still a part of the eating disorder community and trying to reach out and help people. I was seeing therapists all through those 5 years, lots of books, lots of self-help. I lost a lot of friends through that. So that's tough too. I think that's the toughest part about an eating disorder is you lose who you are a little bit, and you lose a lot of friends in the way because they don't understand that. And there's friends, I've never got back because of it. And it is what it is. So I started CrossFit, and about 6 months into CrossFit, I knew I could no longer keep up with my bulimia behaviors because of how intense the workouts are. Okay. And at that point, that is really what helped me get through my eating disorder, was to now focus on my performance instead of the scale. So, and for me, again, it was a 5-year process on and off of these cycles of trying to get better, therapy, clinics, you name it. I was doing it. But for me, what CrossFit helped me do is CrossFit helped me change how I view my fitness. So instead of just working out to burn calories to be skinny, I was now working out to gain strength. I was like, I want a bigger clean and jerk. I want a heavier deadlift, and I want to be able to do pull-ups, and I want to be able to run faster and do that. The CrossFit Gate Opens help that. And then eventually my one addiction is replaced by another addiction. And I think that's really important to know, is for most people, if you have an addictive personality, so I have a very addictive personality, I have to kind of replace one addiction with another addiction. And so CrossFit is my other addiction, I would say. But I try to keep it as balanced and as healthy as possible. So again, my focus is always, bettering myself, not making myself worse in the process. Okay. Now, along with that, a lot of anxiety and depression will come with eating disorders as well. And so a lot of people can relate on this end. So because of my eating disorder, I also developed anxiety and depression. So I was put on depression medication for 2 years. And then I was also on anxiety medication if I was going to have an anxiety attack. Okay. If you've ever had an anxiety attack before, it's like you can't breathe, you can't catch your breath, you don't know why you're crying, but you can't stop crying. They are real things. Okay. So it's funny because when I work with my shred team, so some of you have been on my shred team, like Amanda's been on my shred team. I take a very different approach to weight loss than most people, because I don't think weight loss is this thing that all of a sudden you can just lose 10 pounds very, very quickly. And there's can be a mental side to it. So what I always tell people is small changes over periods of time will make the difference. So for me, I couldn't eat breakfast for like 5 years. I just wouldn't eat breakfast. I just was like, I can't eat breakfast because I ate too much the night before. And this is this binge purge eating cycle. Okay. So it gets to the point where you start feeling better about yourself. And now this is after my eating disorder, right? So I wouldn't eat breakfast. And then at night I would binge because I was so hungry. I didn't eat all day. Right. And then I'd be like, oh, what am I going to, I can't eat breakfast tomorrow. Okay. Because you're on this cycle. And it's about slowly making those changes. So for me, it was, okay, I'm going to start eating breakfast. I'm going to start with 1 pack of oatmeal a day. Okay. So after about a year of eating 1 pack of oatmeal for a day, I was like, okay, you know what? I think I can like add some berries and some peanut butter on that. Okay, cool. Right. So do that for another year. Okay. Now my breakfast looks like 2 packages of oatmeal. Okay. A cup of berries, 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, 2 eggs. Okay. And it's just, again, this is a process that's taken me 5 years almost just to get to where I'm eating my breakfast. So if you're thinking like changes are going to be instant, they aren't, and that's fine. But you have to recognize what positive changes you are instilling, no matter how small they are. Okay. So what I want to do is I kind of want to open the floor up to either if you have questions for me, either about my eating disorder, anxiety, depression, or if you would like to maybe add in your own story for other people to hear. Okay. No.
Sandra, I was just
Mhm.
going to ask why the loss of friendships? Was it just because they didn't understand and you were kind of socially isolating from them because of not wanting to like partake in, let's say, activities that involved eating or drinking, or why?
Yeah. So a little bit of that, and a little bit like I lived in a house with 6 girls. So I would eat their food sometimes on my binge. And then they would know I'd be throwing it up, and they would be very upset by that.
Right.
And so it really is out of your control.
Yeah.
And not like, until you have an eating disorder and been through an eating disorder, you won't understand someone with an eating disorder, because you can't change them yourself. You can help them as much and be as compassionate as you can with people, but there is, again, only so much you can do until that person really starts making those small changes, and you have to support those small changes.
Mhm. And how do you keep the I think it's interesting that you talk about the addiction to CrossFit, because I know when I was in undergrad, one of the aerobics instructors that would run like the university classes became addicted to exercise, and also became, I don't know if she was anorexic or bulimic, but how do you keep that in check now? Like how do you make sure that, you know, you're exercising for the right reasons and not out of addiction?
Yeah. So to give you guys an idea, when I was training competitively, that's different. I have to get so many workouts in based on what I need to do, but I also have to go based on how my body's feeling. So there's times where I'm working out in the morning and at night, because I'm trying to get to a certain spot in my fitness so I can go compete at sanctionals, so I can go make the CrossFit games, right? There's even times now where I do have to watch my weight. So you'll see I'll go on cycles where I actually try to gain weight to get stronger. And then before I go to, say, a sanctional or regional event, I'll try to cut down a little bit of weight, just so when the gymnastics components come up, I'm a little bit lighter for them. So I still do have to play with my weight. But again, I don't think of it as, and I don't make these grand changes. It's just, I focus on my quality of food. So for me, you'll see too in the summer, because I backed off, I essentially retired. I backed off to only training once a day instead of training twice a day. Okay. And I follow a program. I don't go outside of my program. Okay. I do what's on my program, and that's all I do. Okay. Sometimes I'll miss my program. I'm not feeling it. So what's the point of doing a 40-minute workout if I'm literally only going to give 50% through it? And as we all know, CrossFit is about intensity. Okay? I'm better off to do maybe a slower pace workout that day, or no workout at all. To give you guys an idea, I worked out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. Wednesday, like I had a little bit of a workout, but then there was this long 20-minute workout with like 95-pound thrusters, 20 burpee box jump overs for 20 minutes. I was like, oh my God, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard of. And I really just don't have the energy. I don't mentally have it today. So I decided just to cut that out of my whole programming. And then Thursday, just because I could even tell by Wednesday how I'm feeling, Thursday, I took a total rest day. I didn't do anything yesterday. Okay. Except for, I was outside moving logs. I just like to be physically active, but I didn't force myself. These are just chores I wanted to get done. So I think for me is once I realize that if I'm focused on like, this has to get done and I'm not giving the intensity that's required, that's when you have to draw the line, especially with CrossFit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we see that too. The other end, like Chris will pretty much talk open about this too. Like Chris talks about probably having body dysmorphia when he was growing up. So Chris was addicted to gaining weight. So the opposite of what I had, right? Chris was addicted to gaining weight. And he'll tell you like he was on the scale like 5 times a day to see if he was losing or gaining weight. Okay. So it's not just a thing that is just females. It's very prevalent in females, but guys are on the same, a little bit different of an end depending on what their goals are, where like Chris is addicted to being on the scale and being a certain weight, right? But as I talk about why CrossFit's so much better is because it comes down to how you function, okay? Are you faster than you were a week before? Is your gymnastics getting stronger? So it changes your focus of not being focused on a number on the scale, but instead of how is your performance? Okay? Mm-hmm. How many of you guys, I don't know, if you want to put up your hand up, how many of you guys have ever had an anxiety attack or depression? How many of you guys think you guys have? Yeah, a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. I think depression is something that almost everybody kind of goes in and out of cycles of. I think you're allowed to have sad periods in your life, and you're going to have sad periods in your life. And it's about noting that, this is a period in my life that sucks right now. And you're allowed to say that. This sucks, okay? A lot of us right now, this is a period, this quarantine, this sucks, okay? Some of us have maybe lost our job, have lost our income, okay? That's that anxious feeling. And you will just want to sometimes lie in bed and not get out of bed, okay? And I'll sometimes give myself one day. I'll give myself one day of that. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm sad today. I'm upset. Something big has happened in my life. I get this one day to be sad. Cry. I'm not saying you're not allowed to be sad. You are allowed to be sad. Okay. So I'll give myself that one day. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to sit in bed, lie in bed. Don't want to think about anything. Just want to be me, get away from the world just for a little bit. And the next day I get up and I get back at it. So that's something that's works for me typically, is to let yourself feel your emotions, note them instead of suppressing them, because what happens if you start to suppress them, it starts to build up, and that's when we get a lot of issues. Okay. And then it's about coming up with coping mechanisms for this stuff. So I'm sure a lot of you guys feel that fitness helps you with your depression and anxiety, right? A lot of you probably feel like that is maybe your escape, or you might have other things in life too. So, and that's a learning process too. You're not going to know what things work for you right away. Okay. So you don't know what your distraction mechanisms are. So for some people, it could be reading a book, doing a craft. I'm really loving all these lifestyle talks, all these home videos and stuff, because for me, it kind of gives me a mental break in the day to like get away from whatever I was doing, whatever I was thinking, and just come in and be around people again. Right. So I've been making sure, like a lot of familiar faces, I've been making sure to jump on 3 to 4 lifestyle chats a week. Right? Just to hear what people are saying. A couple of really good books. So I'm a bookworm. Okay. So I have a lot of really good books. If you are someone who is struggling with your eating, you might have essentially, you might not qualify yourself as having an eating disorder, but you might actually fall in that category because you're struggling with food and fueling your body. So it's about creating that positive mindset. So some of the things that you could read is Gene Roth, Breaking Free from Emotional Eating. Okay. Or then even the other good one, okay, is called Life Without Ed. And ED, if anybody knows what ED means, it just means eating disorder in short form. So a lot of times when you're in eating disorder clinics or learning, we'll talk about classify your eating disorder. We'll be like, ED. So we'll talk about it as ED. We give it a name. Okay. So these books are too, it's about journaling and reflecting back on yourself. And with this time right now we have, it can either be very difficult or very rewarding for yourself. So you can either, and it's all right because people are going to struggle in this time where they're bored and they're around food and they're going to be thinking about food all the time and what they should eat and what they shouldn't eat, because they're like, well, am I being as active I was? If I'm not, so maybe I should cut here, or maybe I should cut there. And so people are going to be freaked out about their nutritional consumption right now. And that's fine. You're allowed to be freaked out. But what I would recommend, like, talk to your coaches. Like, this is why we're around. You know, I have a client that I check in with weekly. Like, it is a weigh-in, but more we talk about is after we weigh in, I get the number. It's like, how did you feel? What was different this week? And a lot of the problems I find with this one client I have is that she is cutting her carbs too much. And it's like, once we add the carbs back in, the weight comes down. Okay. And her energy is up. She's feeling better. She's having better workouts. So you got to start to find that line is where and how do you feel? Because in the end, people are going to like you for who you are. Okay. Not for what you look like. Okay. Depression, anxiety. Let's talk about anybody else have coping mechanisms that work for them. I would love to hear what you do. Okay.
One thing I found that's really helped besides working out has been journaling too. So if anyone struggles with like depression, anxiety, or just what you were mentioning earlier about being sad and it being okay to be sad, I found writing things out like I'm sad today or I'm sad today because, and then just sort of writing that all out and really sitting with that feeling and just sort of sitting with that and letting, like you mentioned earlier, letting yourself be sad as opposed to constantly trying to just always be happy or be positive. So I find journaling has been one thing that's been really helpful to sort of just write out your feelings and express them in a different way.
Yeah. And so when I was at the beginning of my recovery, that was my main thing I had to do, was to journal every day. I still have my journals. Like, I could pull them out. I could read them to you. I've kept them because it's a time in my period that, you know, I don't regret having an eating disorder now, because I think mentally and physically I am way stronger than I ever was. I think if it wasn't for my eating disorder, I wouldn't be A, as compassionate of a person, and B, as mentally stable as a person. So it was a very good life lesson for me, because before my eating disorder, I was a very, very confident person. When I had my eating disorder, I just kind of like shriveled away. I like literally, like, even my confidence, my personality, and most of you guys know I have a pretty big personality, pretty loud at the gym. And like, it has made me very confident in what I do and has helped me focus in on what I truly love. And when you figure out what you truly love, that makes a huge difference. So most of you guys know I'm a teacher, and I actually teach health and physical education, math and geography. And so one of the things I do in my health and physical education classes is, because I primarily teach female classes, is I am very upfront with my students about my eating disorder that I had, because I think it's important at their age, because it's very, very common for girls in high school and even younger, okay, to have eating disorders. Okay. And you probably won't even know, like, you'll be amazed to find out years down the road, like, how many of your friends had eating disorders that you didn't even know about. Okay. Or even in, one of my best friends had an eating disorder when we were in grade 5, and I couldn't understand it. She should only eat an apple, and at that time, like, I was so young, I didn't get it, right? And then I developed my eating disorder at 19, and now I understand. Okay. Anybody else? Depression, anxiety, coping tips?
Sandra, what about, I was just going to say counselors, counseling. Do you have a therapist?
Yeah.
I find that, because ironically, I was going to talk a little bit about anxiety and depression tomorrow during the chat. So that is a big part of it, I think, of recovery. But also I wanted to ask about medication, and did they help you? Because there's a big stigma about going on medication for anxiety and depression. And
yeah. Yeah. So I had a cognitive behavioral therapist. I also had a psychiatrist. And I was lucky enough that because I was in university at the time, and because my parents have benefits, my parents' benefits would cover so much of my cognitive behavior, and my psychiatrist was actually covered by my university because they're on site. And then because I was in a university plan, I was able to get my anxiety and depression medication for free. Honestly, going on the depression and anxiety medication was probably the best thing for me. Okay. And then it became something that I had to get off because it wasn't good for me anymore. So the depression and anxiety pills did just help me keep a little bit calmer. Okay. Instead of getting so flustered up that my symptoms would come up. And what I mean by symptoms is essentially, for bulimia, it's binging and purging. So the depression kind of instead didn't let me fluctuate my medication. So it didn't let me get these really big highs and didn't let me get these very big lows, which at the time was super important in my recovery. And then my anxiety medication allowed me to sleep. So we regularly joke about me like sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night. Like, I go to bed at 8:30, and like it's a big joke about how much sleep I get. But when I was in university, like, I'd be lucky to get 4 hours of sleep a night because my anxiety and depression was so bad. And then if you're not sleeping, you're not in the cognitive mindset to get stronger and to make the correct decisions. Okay. So, but then there was a point too when I was starting to get better, and about 2 years in, and the depression pills were just keeping me too much in a fog. So it's like I couldn't have any more feelings. Like, you kind of, you by 2 years in, I was kind of feeling a little numb. So that is when I came off of them. But by that part, I was through like probably the toughest part of my eating disorder. And that's why I made the choice to come off them. Because at that time, I was really mentally stronger and able to cope and coming up with coping mechanisms. Even though you might fall off the train, you get back on the next day kind of idea. So I don't like the stigma behind being on anxiety and depression pills, because I'm actually someone who would say that people should take advantage of them at times. And like, Dora, you're a doctor, so I'm sure you can speak on that.
Yeah, sorry. And you know what? Actually, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because the battle that I face a lot from a clinical point of view is people coming in saying right away that they don't want to go on medication. So I think there's two things to that. Number one is, I always tell my patients, if you knew how many people were on medication, you would be amazed. And I tell them, I've already seen 3 or 4 people today for the exact same thing I'm seeing you for. So don't think you're special, because people are so stigmatized by it.
Mhm.
And I think it's a big barrier to them getting better. They have a lot of sort of false information about these terrible side effects and blah, blah, blah. Um, and so because there's such a big stigma, it's nice to hear that, you know, especially coming from somebody who, like yourself, right? You're an elite athlete, you're a teacher, you have so much kind of, you have so much, you can, you're such an influencer. So to hear people say that it's okay to do that and it's okay to need medication, I mean, that can be life-changing, especially for, you know, somebody who's young, who's going through this and is thinking, you know, why can't I do this on my own? You know, I'm a failure kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think what people don't understand too is like the man, like I don't miss being a female teenager. My hormones were crazy. Like I don't miss that. Like how many of you females, like Manda, you're in that phase. Like I don't miss being a female in the hormones. Like I look back and I go, man, I was crazy. Like you'd have these highs and then you'd have these lows, right? Like you get your period and you just be like a disaster crying, right? Like I don't miss that anymore. And so I think for females, especially at that age group who are getting eating disorders, if they can get help and beyond, I think that's going to be a big savior for them.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right when you talk about boys too. So, you know, having a 12-year-old son who's in hockey, you know, I can already start to see these, you know, like even just some of the statements that they make about, you know, wanting to be buff. And I'm always trying to bring it back to like, no, you have to be a good athlete. You have to be strong. You have to be healthy. You have to eat well. Because I think, you know, it's better now. I think people see that it affects boys a bit more nowadays, but it's still, you know, we forget about the boys. We forget that they can be affected as well. The numbers are probably smaller, but it's still a real thing, right?
Yeah. And like, as I mentioned, like, that's why I gave the example about Chris there. Like, I think everybody knows Chris. Like, Chris is a very confident person. Like, if you see him, but there's a time in his life he'll tell you, I was on the scale 5 times a day, like stressing out about getting food into me, how I was gonna get bigger, right? And like that constant fear of like, I need to eat every 2 hours or I'm gonna lose weight. And like that's mentally straining too. It's just on the opposite end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's crazy how many people will have it varies. An eating disorder, it's like a spectrum. It's like it's on a spectrum of like, yeah, you could be at the worst end of being like bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa, or you could be on the other end where like you don't think you have any problems, but you're under eating and you're addicted to having to work out to make sure you're losing calories in a day. But people won't see that as a problem. They'll just be like, that's just their normal way of life, right? Instead of just working out because, you know, yes, they want to maintain a healthy lifestyle, right? But some people will be too much addicted. And sometimes we see that in CrossFit, like when we're like, to clients, we're like, you need to take a rest day. Like your hormones, if you don't rest properly, guys, your hormones will inflect and you'll actually like, you'll retain water weight. Okay. So I'll give you guys an idea. I weigh myself every day still. So I jump on the scale every day in the morning just to see where I am, because it helps me with where I need to stay for understanding my strength. And again, if I'm in a strength phase, I want to gain weight and I want to gain it appropriately. So I'll even adjust like how many carbs I'm eating, how much protein I'm eating, just to make sure. So yesterday I jumped on the scale. Okay. And then I took a rest day yesterday. Okay. I woke up lighter today and I didn't do anything yesterday, guys. But that's just how your hormones work. Your hormones in your body needs a break too. Okay. And when it recovers, your body works better. Let's see. Anybody else? Coping mechanisms. I think Nicole came on there at one point. Nicole, did you have something you wanted to add?
I think, thanks. First of all, thank you so much for sharing this topic with us. I think that's super important to be having this dialogue. And secondly, similar to talking about the issues with your students, like as a parent, I try to do that with my kids so that they understand that there's good days and bad days, and then we can still get through them. And I think as we become more aware of our different mental states, it helps that we normalize it with our kids, so that they are prepared going into when their hormones hit. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's super important that you guys are talking with your kids. I'm not gonna lie. I distanced myself from my parents when I developed my eating disorder. I was living away in university, and I didn't want them even a part of this. I didn't want them to even know. Like, I didn't even come out to them till like about 2 years into my eating disorder that I had, and I was trying to get better and stuff. So they weren't able to help. And then when I did come out, you know, they did help me financially, you know, see a therapist, benefits. There's stuff that my parents were able to help me with. So I think it's important for you parents to be, a lot of you are parents, so just to be aware and just try to make good choices. I grew up in a household too that my mom was like, love my mom, nothing against my mom. I grew up in a household though where my mom has always struggled with her weight and is always constantly going on a different fad diet. So that was something I always grew up around, and would be like, you know, fluctuate weight, lose weight, kind of. I didn't really pay attention, but probably self-consciously it did affect me seeing that. I also grew up with, love my grandma. It was just her birthday the other day too. My grandma though, she would be like, I was 125 pounds when I gave birth to your mother. And I was like, holy shit. Like, okay, like I'm like, I was 125 pounds at the skinniest of my life. I didn't have a kid. So I think too, like, as parents, like me, myself now, I probably would never really talk about my weight in front of my kid. I might talk about, oh, like when I talk with my nephew, I talk about, you know what, I need to eat this because, you know, we're going to go do that big workout together. And you want to lift that. He's obsessed with my 50-pound dumbbell. We're going to go lift that 50-pound dumbbell. Let's eat this food so we can lift that 50-pound dumbbell. So I try to talk about food and fueling my body so I can do activities. Or I'll be like, you know, Reese, we need to eat this food because, you know, it's going to help with our brain so we can go learn and do all these different activities. So I think putting a different spin on your food, and making more a connection point of fueling your body so they can do the activities they want to do, they can learn, they can have a lot of energy with their friends, is probably a better spin than saying like, you can't eat this because it's going to make you fat. Maybe you approach it, you know, this is a better option because it's going to make you feel better, right? So that's something I think that's really important, that a lot of parents are just kind of aware, and don't be scared to have those tough conversations with your kids. You know, if your kid's acting a little bit different and you think something's weird about what's going on with their eating, just sit down and talk with them. Just be like, hey, you know, I noticed maybe like you're not eating dinner as much. Is something going on? Is something going on in life that's making you feel this way? Because it might not be anything to do with food, right? It might be totally they're depressed or they're having anxiety about other issues, which is why they're not eating, because eating is something as humans we can control. So if we want to naturally cut back on it, that gives us back our self-control. And I think, hold on, in the chat there. When situation, you'll know it won't last forever. That helps knowing there is an end. Yeah. So one of the things I was talking to about my girlfriend who has an eating disorder of 10 years now is, you do gain weight back when you're eating disorder. Okay, you rebound. And that's probably the hardest part for someone with an eating disorder is rebounding and knowing that you're going to go through discomfort before you're back to being happy. I think that's why my husband and I worked out so well. I met my husband right when I recovered from my eating disorder. And so he loved me for being who I am at that time, right? And at that time, I was probably at my heaviest I've ever been in my life when I met my husband. And now the joke is that I've just gotten fitter, and now he's putting on the dad bod a little bit, but that's all right. So it's just about being very, knowing that slow changes will come And it's better to make those slow changes than just to drastically think that it's going to happen overnight. And accepting that there is going to be certain changes about yourself that you're not going to be love at the moment, but those will also change. Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions or coping mechanisms? Or for me, the reason why I started sharing is because I think it's important for people to know that eating disorders are very prevalent. I could talk to a group of my friends and probably 5 of them will now admit that they will. And it's not something to be embarrassed about. You shouldn't be embarrassed about that you've struggled with something and you're getting better, or you want to get better, or you have gotten better, right? And I think that's really key. So if we know someone's struggling, then we can help better.
Hey, Sandra.
Hey, Nita.
So yeah, I was just gonna say too, like, I really appreciate everything you said and being so open with us, and just that's one of my coping strategies, is just kind of trying to be open. And when I'm not feeling great or when I'm feeling depressed, just telling the people around me that's how I'm feeling. And it often, that alone helps me get out of it, because it also helps people understand why you might be acting a certain way, and they give you a bit more space, or they're a little more understanding about your behavior. So I find just kind of like vocalizing some of our worst fears is like one of the best ways to kind of move past them.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. If how I like to think of it now is like with stuff, it's like nothing mentally can break me. Nothing's harder than when I went through my eating disorder. So like when I see like even this quarantine situation right now, I'm like, man, I'm in a good mental space. Like I have things in my life I'm happy about. Yeah, I can't see like certain people right now, but I'm going to get to. That's really important because I just kind of always reflect back to my eating disorder, and I think, nothing was harder than getting through and learning how to cope with my eating disorder and surviving it, essentially. And so I always reflect back to it as a strength point. So that's why I always say I don't regret having an eating disorder, because for me, it's a great reflection piece to see where I built from. Anybody else want to add in? I'd love to even hear if some of the guys want to add in on their personal feelings about depression, anxiety, or eating. Just like give us an idea of like, or maybe it's something you never thought about. You're like, what? These people are crazy. What are they talking about? It's just food. No? Okay. Okay, guys, so we're getting to the end here. More so, if you have any questions or comments, if you want to come out now, ask them again. Like, if you want to ask me something personal, like, I really, like, I'll answer it. I don't mind. Like, I've told you, like, I very much accepted my past. So if that's something that helps you to understand it better, go for it, right? Anybody?
I just want to say thanks again for sharing all that. It helps to see and hear other super strong people that I look up to, or I'm sure everyone else looks up to, and know that they've struggled with things like anxiety, depression, or eating disorders, and know that it's not just me, right? We're not in this alone.
Yeah, and I think we're all CrossFitters, so I think right now too, like, everybody here is willing to better themselves. We're not hiding and isolating ourselves, and that's really important with any type of disorder or anxiety or depression. So just make sure you're always trying to better yourself.
I think you're freaking fantastic, Sandra. Honestly.
Oh, thanks, Star.
Honestly, because, looking at it from a perspective where I know how hard it is to battle addiction, because I see it all the time, addiction or just mental health issues, but in a way, this addiction to control, right? You were addicted to having control of everything that went into your body, having control of every calorie you could get rid of. And it is freaking hard to get over. So kudos to you, man. I think it's amazing. I really do.
Thank you. Okay, guys, we will end the session there. If nobody has any more questions, or, you know, if you do have a question and you just didn't want to ask, like, just feel free to message me through Messenger or Instagram. You can find me at Sandra Hamilton. I'm linked on a couple of the things on the Instagram and Facebook page for Cristini Athletics. But thanks, guys, for all coming out. I really appreciate that. It just shows how much the community is connected. Hi, Gemma.
Thanks, Sandra. See you guys later.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
See my hand.